But here's my controversial take on this. I could not care less that liberals are doing this because Republicans just spent 4 years denying the results of the last election wrongly in their case.
See, now this, I get it. It makes sense to me. I have had so many conversations with people like Rob Noor, who went down about 15 different rabbit holes to justify, if not fully committing to the there was voter fraud position, but walking right up to the line. So even though I don't co-sign any of this blue and on with regard to like looking for these massive frauds, I kind of understand taking the position of, let's just say there was voter fraud. Right? There were that many voter registrations and she got less votes than Biden. Come on. I mean, she got endorsed by Taylor Swift. Give me a break. It's Taylor Swift. Are you kidding me? That's like a nuclear bomb. I haven't quite decided if I'm gonna actually do that. It's a concept of a plan right now. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, hit like, comment, subscribe. It really helps us out and I appreciate everybody who does that. Kyle Kulinski has an interesting theory about what we should do moving forward. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm a little conflicted on it because I kind of get it. Let me find it. Hold on.
In an explosion of liberals claiming that MAGA rigged it. I'm going to walk you through the various theories here and then give you my take on it. So let's start easy.
Even Maddow came out with a video where she was like, you know, Trump a few days before the election was saying you don't need to worry about voting. There's something kind of fishy about that. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Have some goddamn dignity, for Christ's sakes.
Let's ease into it a little bit here. This part is not controversial. It was reported all throughout the day on election day. And it's kind of interesting to me that this hasn't been discussed more. It's kind of wild that we had bomb threats in Democratic precincts all over the country. And I think
there were 6 different bomb threats in Georgia alone, I think, on election night. 6 bomb threats. And we're just like, nobody's talking about it. No one is talking about it. We just like got over it within like an hour as if it's just normal.
In Georgia alone, there were 60 bomb threats.
60? I thought it was 6. There's 10 times the amount.
Majority black districts. So look, that is on its face. That's an attempt to suppress votes, right? And how many people didn't vote because there was a bomb threat and then they didn't get back to it later, right? So let's watch this little clip from PBS.
The ever-optimistic Lisa Desjardins. Miles O'Brien is back with us. Miles, I understand that as part of your reporting, you've put together that there were some 60 bomb threats, not credible bomb threats, but bomb threats nonetheless, that were called in to polling sites across Georgia. Is that right?
Yeah. 60 bomb threats, many of them attributed, we believe, to Russian sources. None of them turned out to be anything, but it did gum up the works here a little bit. But, you know, Jeff, I think the takeaway story here from Georgia is despite all of that, this was a pretty smooth election.
So, again, I think that's a big deal. It wasn't just the state of Georgia. It was other states as well. And you got to...
Yeah, despite 60 bomb threats, it was pretty good. Pretty good election.
Think, how much did that suppress people turning out? Majority Democratic precincts where this happened. If the roles were reversed and it was bomb threats at majority Republican precincts, you bet your ass Republicans would never shut up about it. And they would use that fact alone to say the election was rigged. They stole it from us. So that's thing number one. Now, let's graduate a little bit here. So this is a clip.
See, this is what I'm talking about. I didn't pre-watch this video, I swear to God.
From Rachel Maddow's show before the election. Okay, and I've actually played this clip for you before, and I played this clip for you in the context of there were 70 MAGA election-denying officials who are in positions of power to certify the votes in the various swing states. And the concern leading up to it is, regardless of what the outcome is, they're going to claim there's fraud and there's a problem, and we are not certifying Kamala Harris as the winner in these various swing states. So that's the...
There's definitely a part of me that sees the merit and is even tempted to just fully commit to not accepting the outcome of the race. But then I feel like I would be just a massive hypocrite. So to my core, I for sure accept the outcome of the election. I don't suspect massive fraud. I just think that Trump won. But there's a part of me, like moving forward, whenever I'm in debates with MAGA people, when that stuff picks back up again, there's a part of me that just wants to commit to just being like, yeah, but we all know it was stolen. I mean, come on, use your head and just fully commit to that, because that's what we had to deal with for 4 years, for 4 goddamn years with these lunatics. They just would not accept that Biden won the election. Recent polls showed as many as 80% of registered Republicans believe that the 2020 election was stolen. Baselessly, there's no evidence for it, right? And there's part of me that just wants to commit to it like a 4-year bit. And if I'm being honest with you, I haven't decided if I'm going to do that or not. Like that, you know, it's in my mind. It's cooking. There is a part of me that just wants to, at every step, at every opportunity, just flat out deny that Donald Trump won in 2024, even though on the inside, I just fully accept. It's not even terribly shocking to me that it happened. You know what I mean? It was massively disappointing, but it didn't shock me. Like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. It's America, right?
The context of this clip that you're about to see, but there's an interesting thing Trump kept saying on the campaign trail leading up to the election that now in retrospect, liberals are looking at this and they're going, that's weird. Watch this.
Let me also point out something more strange, which has been happening at the same time and it hasn't had as much attention. The day before Trump made those remarks on Friday, he said, you're never going to have to vote again after you vote for me this one time. The day before that, on Thursday last week, he didn't say that people wouldn't have to vote anymore once he was elected this November. No, the day before that, on Thursday, he told his supporters, not that they're not going to have to vote again, but that they don't have to vote this time, that they don't need to vote for him this November.
My instruction, we don't need the votes. I have so many votes.
My instruction, we don't need the votes. I have so many votes.
She's kind of hinting at this like nefarious scheme. And you can explain that quote from Trump by just saying he's just kind of like an idiot who just speaks off the top of his head and doesn't think about the things that he's going to say. And he was just very, very confident that he's going to win. You know, for Maddow to be like feeding this red meat to her, you know, super libbed up audience is a bit silly to me. It's kind of silly.
He said that on Thursday last week. And it turns out this is something, when you look, he says this all the time now. Watch.
My instruction, we don't need the votes. I have so many votes.
We don't need votes. I tell my people, I don't need any votes. We got all the votes we need. I don't need votes. We don't need votes. We got more votes than anybody's ever had.
He was doing this during the primaries too. You know, like it's perfectly consistent with his rhetoric recently.
You don't have to vote. Don't worry about voting. The voting, we got plenty of votes.
Don't worry about voting.
MSNBC has a lot of viewers. I think it's over the sane washing. You know what, though? I think I just saw something today where MSNBC and CNN saw their lowest ratings in 25 years. I think is what I saw show up on my feed, which kind of makes sense. Like you can kind of feel it. Like the vibes out there right now are not great. Like I think a lot of people are looking to just unplug from politics. A lot of people have gone full black pill. Basically every lefty content creator is losing followers to one degree or another. And it's like, you can't blame them, right? Like kind of makes sense. And so we're stuck in this limbo. Where we're just waiting for Trump to be inaugurated. And I think once he's inaugurated and his cabinet takes shape and he starts doing whatever he's going to do, then I think things will start to sort of like find their balance again. I do think we're going to see a repeat of the first Trump term where he just goes out there and does and says these outrageous things and it provokes a backlash. And it seems somewhat predictable in that respect. I'm also internally preparing for the possibility that he gets in there and he does all this outrageous stuff and for whatever reason the public likes him for it this time. I'm internally preparing for mass deportations and then his approval rating going up. I'm not telling you that that's going to happen. I'm not telling you that I think that's going to happen. I'm just internally preparing myself for that possibility. So that if it comes, if it plays out that way, it doesn't sideswipe me and take me off guard. It's entirely possible that he pursues a mass deportation program and then he sees his approval ratings go up by like 5 points. It's possible. We don't really know.
Of all the weirdness around this campaign, this is a truly strange thing to tell people, right? Don't vote. I don't need your vote. I don't want your vote. I mean, all the surface level weirdness is, worth noting.
So she goes on to show even more clips of him saying that over and over and over and over. So now liberals are looking back and going, why would you say that like 1,000 times leading up to the election? All right, now we're going to go one layer deeper. One of the claims that's being made by liberals is there's a Starlink conspiracy theory about how Elon Musk had Starlink placed over the swing states while the votes were being counted. And then there was one Starlink satellite that like crashed and burned after the fact. But they're claiming Starlink was used to mess with the vote count.
Stop. Who is this real? Is this a real thing? I don't doubt that somebody out there is saying this, but I feel like I haven't seen anything like. You guys have seen this conspiracy theory? How many of you guys have seen this conspiracy theory that Starlink changed the votes? Really? Okay, that's it. You know what? That's a credit to me because I've been spending less time on Twitter. So it's been good for my mental. Get outside more, walk more, exercise more, spend less time on social media. I haven't seen any of this before. This is the first time hearing of this. You've seen it on Reddit? Oh boy. Okay. God damn it.
And give it to Trump, basically. That's the gist of what they're saying. There's also some people on TikTok, liberals on TikTok, they're like astrologer types, and they're making arguments about how this is not over yet. It's not over yet, bro. But to the Starlink point,
it's over.
Here's
this. I don't know if you guys remember, but the same thing happened in 2016 as well. So I actually think like the Russia stuff, Trump brought that on himself by inviting Putin to, or encouraging Putin to hack Hillary Clinton, which he did. So the Russiagate stuff, like Trump brought that on himself. There was more than enough reasons to be suspicious of his ties to Russia. But there were also people that were wanting faithless electors to prevent Trump from taking power. There were people that objected to the certification of the votes. Joe Biden was presiding over the Congress during that time, and there was a famous clip of him, saying it's over and then like slamming the gavel down. But there was an initial groundswell of lib energy, like trying to explain the election through nefarious means or trying to concoct some scheme to make sure that he didn't take any power. So it's not exactly surprising to see people doing the same thing this time around. Although this time, this stuff sounds way more like nuts than the first time around. Like Starlink changing votes and machines is pretty insane.
Joe Rogan telling a story after the election about what Elon Musk was allegedly doing on election night. And again, this is one of those clips that liberals are now looking at and going, that's weird. Here we
just scrolling through Twitter, right? Like, I feel like we all agree that this, quote unquote secret app he was probably just scrolling through Twitter, I assume, right?
The Dana translation, but Dana said
Rogan's Elon impersonation sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
According to Dana White and Joe Rogan.
Yeah, it was just like poly market odds, I assume. Like, I highly doubt that Elon had engineers come up with this super duper secret app to accurately predict the outcome of the election.
Rogan, 4 hours before the results, he already knew. Okay. So here's a clip from TikTok that gets a little bit into not the Starlink portion of the conspiracy, but just the general conversation about.
I don't love this guy, to be honest with you. There's something about him that's just kind of off to me. You know what I mean? I just don't like this guy.
Was the election rigged? Here we go.
Was the election stolen? Let's go ahead and get into this. And please watch the full video or else you're going to miss important information. So a lot of people are not happy with the outcome of the election. I'm certainly among them. But that has also led people to look at this and say, this doesn't make sense. And they think something nefarious happened. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I mean, she got about, 10 million votes less than Joe Biden did in a year when we had record registration for voting. I mean, Taylor Swift put out a post.
Is that even true? What is the amount? So what are the results so far? 2024 election results. And first of all, so Biden got 81 million. Is that right? 2020 election results. Biden got 81.2 million votes, close to 81.3 million votes. And Kamala so far, I think, is up to 72 million. Is that right? So it's about 9 right now. And they're still counting votes in California. That's just how we do things around here. We like to take our time. All right. She has around 73 million votes right now. So that is quick math. About 8.3 million, 8.5 million votes less as of right now. And we're still counting votes. So initially people were saying that Kamala she got 15 million less votes than Biden. And people were going off the raw total votes like the night of the election and not giving the various states more time to count their votes, which is just stupid. But whatever.
And almost crashed the voter registration page from people going there. There was so much traffic. She told people to vote. Beyonce told people to vote. We had record turnout in early voting. We had record turnout at the polls. And yet somehow a ton of people didn't vote from this information.
All of this is just really easy to explain. We went through an economic contraction. It wasn't a full-on recession, but it was a contraction. Everybody felt the sting of inflation. They blamed the incumbent party. It's happening all over the world. It's not that crazy. Like, it seems crazy if you live in a lib bubble. If you're in a full-on like lib echo chamber, then it's like, wait, what the excuse me? Taylor Swift endorsed her? Hello? Beyonce endorsed her? Hello? How is it possible that she only got 73 million votes so far? Well, it's about 8 million less than what Biden got, and there was an economic downturn. So yeah, kind of makes sense.
Then, in addition to that, after the election, we started seeing videos pop up like this.
I checked the status of my ballot, and it says I never voted, which is really weird because I definitely voted.
Tell me why my ballot was rejected.
There's stuff like this every election in 2020. And here's something that's happened in every single election in my lifetime. There's always reports of people, and tell me if you guys have seen the same thing, but every single election and midterm, you'll see people taking video of themselves like at a voting machine and voting for one candidate, and then it registers as the other candidate. Something fishy's going on here. I voted for Hillary and it put me to Trump or whatever. Every single election, there's stuff like that goes on. Well, the hanging Chads thing was real. That was like a real thing, but there's always testimonials from people alleging some form of in every single election. It happens every time.
I was properly registered to vote.
Which is why it's best to just like, Jesus. It's not that no ever happens, but for me, it's best to sit back, let it play out, wait for the dust to settle. And then we have various agencies that look into these claims. I have faith in these agencies' ability to detect. And, 99% of the that gets passed around and goes viral on Twitter is just complete bullshit.
I turned my ballot in exactly perfectly. I even checked with an election official at the drop box.
Where's my vote? Where's my ballot? Because my
probably just like didn't show up in the system till the next day. That's what I assume happened in 90% of these cases here.
My husband and I both went on election day in person. They don't have a record of my vote.
A lot of posts like that going up. I've had no less than 30 people reach out to me, some who I know personally, telling me that they checked and their vote was not counted, and that is a problem. And then when you see threads like this one talking about how you could go in if you had access to the code and change the code and implant, and remember last election they said it was stolen, and they reviewed the machines and they got access to the machines and they tested if they could be hacked, and then they hacked them and had access to the code. So all of this combined starts to feel very, very fishy. But honestly, what would it take to hack an election? I mean, it would take like a foreign power that wanted to disrupt our election, someone who wanted Donald Trump to win and didn't want Kamala Harris to win. It would take them collaborating with like...
It is essentially impossible to hack an election. There are so many audits that take place after every election. So many audits in every state. If there was widespread massive fraud, it would be detected rather easily. I just don't have a lot of respect for lefty creators that are coming out and giving this stuff oxygen. It's just so stupid. It's like, especially because we criticize Trump people for doing this for the last 4 years. This creator has probably, I assume, has come out with videos exploring Trump's bullshit claims of voter fraud. And then here he is, 4 years later, doing the I'm just asking questions shit. And it drives me insane.
I don't know, a James Bond villain-esque tech billionaire.
And then, yeah, they want clicks. That's the other thing too, is like in the era of social media, there's this serious financial incentive to post this clickbaity shit, which only serves to obfuscate and confuse people. And I hate it. I hate it.
Who also had a vested interest in controlling the outcome of you mean something like this?
I mean, it's not impossible. I mean, I'm not going to say that massive voter fraud isn't possible, but when we're talking about auditing votes, what a state will do is they'll take like a certain percentage of the vote total let's say, you know, in Georgia or whatever, they'll grab 2 million ballots or 1 million ballots and they'll go through and they'll, you know, like reach out to people and say, like, does this match this, and blah, 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 blah. And so, like, sometimes in this country, we do these intense audits. And so it's how do you do massive voter fraud and then survive like dozens of vote audits all over the country? How do you do that?
It would take something like this. And all of this is very compelling, but we also have to be real. This is all anecdotal. And if we're going to form an informed opinion, we have to look at all the information available. And when we look at all the information, there's a few harsh realities that seem to contradict this anecdotal evidence. One, polling going into the election and the election results is like scary accurate. Like the polling really does seem to match, especially in swing states.
Well, it was a little more pro-Trump than most of the pollsters let on, right?
A little more, but that's the thing. Like, I feel like they're both right. He's right in the sense that the polls this time around were the most accurate out of the last 3 elections. So the polls this year, at the state level included, more accurately reflected the outcome. In 2020, they massively overestimated Biden's popularity, not just nationally, but in the swing states. He ended up winning, obviously. And in 2016, they moderately overestimated Hillary Clinton's popularity nationally and at the state level. In 2020, they it was just like a small, you know, like 1.5 points, 2 points in various states, but they were pretty accurate this time, albeit underestimating Trump once more. The Seltzer poll, I don't even want to talk about that. In fact, I never want to hear the name Seltzer ever again in my life. How do we ban that phrase? Mods? How do we ban the phrase Seltzer? We can talk about Seltzer, but I never want to see the name Seltzer ever again. She gave me so much hopium. She made me feel so at ease. She was like a warm blanket on a cold night in December. She was like a warm blanket, like a weighted blanket next to a fire, you know, crackling logs. It made me feel so good. And she was off by 17 points, for Christ's sakes.
I looked at the predictions of all the different polling outlets, and I want to say like half of them had Trump winning, half of them had Kamala winning, but only like maybe one had Trump with as big of a margin in the Electoral College as he ended up winning by.
More importantly, though, the exit polling matches the results that we have. Exit polling exists as a way.
See, that, I don't know about that, because remember when the exit polling came out, we did a segment on it, and it got like 500,000 views. And the number one issue, seemingly across the country, was democracy. Like voting to protect democracy. Now, the way I interpreted that and many other people interpreted that was, oh, so the Democrats' main argument of like, this guy's an authoritarian. He tried to overthrow the last election. He did the fake elector slates. He did January 6th. I looked at that as, oh, this does not look good for Trump. But turns out Trump won. So then it looks like maybe some of the people who cited democracy as the reason for voting, in their minds, they were like, well, Kamala Harris didn't win the primary. And it's very undemocratic that she's even running, and she's the nominee for the Democrats.
And Joe Biden stole it in 2020. So yeah, I think it's reasonable to assume that, you know, half the people that said that democracy was their highest priority were coming at it from the perspective of, well, the Democrats keep rigging elections.
And I think Trump is going to save democracy, or they think like, oh, all the lawfare and political persecution of Trump is anti-democratic, and that's why I'm going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's possible people interpreted it like that and Republicans successfully flipped the argument back on Democrats. Or if the conspiracy theorists are right, then it's like, yeah, hold on. Democracy was the number one issue. That should cut pro-Democrat. But it didn't? Okay, let's keep going.
For us to spot some sort of voter fraud or something that happened, if it's more than 2 points difference, I think that's grounds for an investigation. It matches. The exit polls match the results that we got. And I really, really don't think you could hack the exit polls. I mean, even hacking our election system. Oh,
I guess he's talking about the exit polls, like the actual, like, who did you vote for exit polls. I actually didn't see any of those, but I was referring to the issues-based exit poll as like, what was your main reason for voting?
Is a mess. All these different states running it different ways with different systems, and some online and some not, and it's a whole thing.
I'm not aware of any voting machines in the country that are online. Are you guys? I'm pretty sure all of them are kept offline to prevent hacking.
It seems that the reality, unfortunately, is just that a bunch of Americans bought his bullshit and voted for him again.
So I showed you this video because I feel like this guy tried, like, you know.
Hi much as bulking up for the Dem January 6th.
That's right.
He has sent secret invites to all of chat. Be sure to check your spam junk mail. Also, when we're all gathered at the Capitol, this is what we will sound like. Bring your libtears, memes, and shorts for homoerotica.
That's right. Who's coming to the Capitol on January 6th? It's going to be wild, guys.
You know, gave like almost a both sides argument here to try to break it down for you. All right, but now let me get to what I think is actually the biggest piece here, which is, first I'll show you this video. This is Steve Bannon interviewing Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas. And this is Ken Paxton admitting that back in 2020, he did something that should be illegal, that basically flipped Texas for Trump, and that according to him, he thinks Biden would have won Texas if it wasn't for his actions as Attorney General.
Did he really say that?
It's certainly critical to my state, and that's why we fought off these 12 lawsuits. We had them in Houston, we had them in San Antonio, we had them in Austin, we had them in the counties where you'd have the most liberal judges. And it was a concerted effort nationally with lots of money going into it. And just knowing that we had 12 lawsuits that we had to win. And if we had lost one of them, like if we lost Harris County, Trump won by 620,000 votes in Texas. Harris County mail-in ballots that they wanted to send out were 2.5 million. Those were all illegal, and we were able to stop every one of them. Had we not done that, we would have been in the very same situation. We would have been on election night. I was watching election night, and I knew when I saw what was happening in these other states that that would have been Texas. We would have been in the same boat. We would have been one of those battleground states that they were counting votes in Harris County for 3 days, and Donald Trump would have lost the election.
So what Ken Paxton is saying here is, I waged lawsuits as the Attorney General of Texas. I waged a bunch of lawsuits to try to get mail-in ballots thrown out from majority Democratic districts. And what he's saying is, I won those cases. If I didn't win those cases, those mail-in ballots probably would have been enough to flip the election for Texas in 2020 to Biden. That is an astonishing admission. So now this is back in 2020. It's a clip. I don't know why more people don't talk about this clip. This clip is astonishing. This is basically like, even though Republicans scream that Democrats rig elections all the time, this is Ken Paxton, the Republican Attorney General.
Well, of course, in Republicans' minds, they viewed the massive mail-in ballot campaign across the country as, you know, as inherently democratic because they're deeply suspicious of mail-in ballots. They think that people are just being mailed like 5 ballots and they all just fill it in and it's all fraudulent. And, you know, there's no reason to believe that. There's never been any evidence to establish that this is the case. But I'm sure in Ken Paxton's mind, he wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm going to steal a bunch of Democratic votes. I'm sure he strikes me as a bit of an ideologue. And it wouldn't shock me if Ken Paxton actually believed that he was preventing fraudulent votes. And yeah.
Admitting he rigged an election in Texas in 2020. But that brings me back to 2024 to what I would argue is probably the most highfalutin argument for trickery and trickery on the right that I've seen so far. So Greg Palast is a legendary independent journalist, and he's forever been on top of this kind of stuff, right? These sort of stories about elections and voter suppression and things of that nature. And I'll just let this clip here speak for itself. So here's Greg Palast on Mark Thompson's show, and he gives his take as to what went down in this election.
For me, there are a lot of different ways in which the people's voice is suppressed. The latest conspiracy theories that have been associated with Elon Musk involve the technological reach, essentially, of Starlink manipulating data, etc. The tried and true way to suppress the people's voice is by making it harder for them to vote. And voter suppression has been taken to a high art in many of these states, like Georgia, for example, is just probably head of that parade.
That's right.
And when it comes to talking about that,
they pass these laws that make no sense. Like you can't, it's illegal to give somebody water if they're standing in line at a ballot location.
And the ways in which voter rolls are shed of Democratic voters in this case, that's the, as I say, tried and true, baked in way.
And, here's the thing is that
of Democratic voters in this case, that's the, and the ways in which voter rolls are shed of Democratic voters in this case, that's the, as I say, tried and true, baked in way that you can, conspiracy theorists, you can sink your teeth into a narrative. And the guy who is without peer when it comes...
Well, that stuff just happens all out in the open. It's like you don't call that stuff conspiracy theories. You can just take a look at the laws that are being put on the books in all these various states to intentionally make it more difficult to vote. I'm not going to get hung up on that, but it's been a problem for years.
comes to bringing light to.
It's not, you're not going to like, I just don't think you're going to break through. I don't think you're going to make a compelling argument to people. Like, I feel like median voters support these kind of measures. I feel like median voters, the Republicans have done a really good job of convincing the median voter that massive voter fraud is a thing. I feel like if you were to go out and poll Americans, just grab 1,000 random people off the street in any state, in any city, I feel like probably 50-60% of them are going to say something like, yeah, I think voter fraud happens all over the country all the time.
Voter suppression, the aggressive shedding of voters from the voter rolls, is this guy right here. So glad we got him. Love his books. I love his reporting. I love his latest movie. How about it for Greg Palast, everybody? Greg, what a week you had. I know you were really doing some real-time reporting on what was happening with voter disenfranchisement. Can you give us an update, on what happened a bit? Just bring us up to speed, and then where that all stands now.
Well, Mark, it involves millions of voters. I mean, I don't think we understand in America how much what we politely call vote suppression, which is a fancy word for saying screwing people of color out of their vote, which is what it really comes down to. So, and I'm talking millions of votes. You know, for those who don't know me, Greg Palast, I'm a reporter for BBC Television and the Guardian newspapers out of England. And one thing we do in BBC is that when we announce the vote, we say so many, 1,000 votes for Labor, 1,000 votes for Conservatives, and then we say how many votes weren't counted. Well, we don't do that in America for good reason, because the number of votes we don't counted is in the millions. And so, for example, so I have just put out a film, Vigilantes, Inc., America's Vote Suppression Hitmen. Now, we have an organization called True the Vote, which is backed by Donald Trump. They did the film 2,000 Mules. He released it from Mar-a-Lago. He's been a big promoter of their work. But what people don't know is their main work is to challenge the right of voters to vote. Now, this may sound odd, but in America, unlike every other developed country in the world, anyone can challenge the vote of someone else in 43 states. This is left over from Jim Crow. So for example, in Georgia, we had one single woman, a Republican operative working for Marjorie Taylor Greene, one single woman challenged 32,000 voters. Another Republican official is the Republican chairman for in Southern Georgia, a guy named Alton Russell. He personally.
I'm worried about Tulsi, but the RFK one, I don't know which one I'm worried about more, RFK or Tulsi. They're both, I don't even know what to say. Like, I feel like I can accept Gates before I can accept Tulsi and RFK. I mean, they're all three like laughably, it's like absurd. It's comically bad and dangerous, you know, if we can get a little serious with you. But Tulsi as the DNI, you know, being given access to all of our country's secrets when she is just a fire hose of Kremlin talking points, that versus, you know, RFK Jr., you know, HHS sits at the head of all of these, like, I think there's like over a dozen health-related agencies. And HHS stands at the very top of that. And so for him to be in charge of all of these health agencies, like, just imagine how COVID would have played out if RFK Jr. was head of the HHS. Like, potentially thousands and thousands and thousands more people dead.
Challenge 4,000 voters. Now, who are these voters? Almost all of them were black soldiers out of Fort Benning, Georgia, where he's chairman of the Republican Party there. One is named Gamaliel Turner, Major Gamaliel Turner. Now, Major Turner, yes, there's that film, Vigilantes, Inc. Major Turner was waiting for his vote. He was assigned to a base in California. There he is at Fort Hueneme in front of one of the jets there. He was assigned. He's 70 years old.
It's going to be really interesting to see Republicans turn around, and they're going to have to like majorly shift from the kind of Republicans that we saw during the Obama years when Michelle Obama was doing this massive push to introduce kale as a regular ingredient in school cafeteria lunches. And she got so much pushback for that. So much pushback. And RFK Jr., as far as I'm aware, wants to go so much further than that. So it'll be interesting to see if like the MAGA people go along with his suggestions or if they similarly push back.
Career military, African-American, and he was assigned to California. And so this Republican Party operative challenged his vote and 4,000 others, almost all of them black soldiers out of Fort Benning, Georgia. This is no joke. Now you'd say, well, okay, that's a few votes. No, it ain't. True the Vote, as of August 5th, had already challenged 852,000 citizens. Now, these aren't government officials that are doing the challenging. These are individual vigilantes, self-proclaimed vote fraud hunters.
So just to put that in perspective for you, what he's saying is True the Vote, this right-wing operation that brought us Dinesh D'Souza's 2,000 Mules, where the whole claim is Democrats rigged the 2020 election. What Greg Palast is saying is that group, True the Vote, as they scream Democrats are rigging elections, part of their operation, the bulk of their operation, is to challenge provisional ballots from majority black districts. And get
Hang on, guys. I got to drink a protein shake. Just so everybody knows, I'm going to drink a protein shake right now. We've got some oats. We've got some oats. We got a half cup of oats. We got 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds. Very calorie rich. 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds have 180 calories. It's actually kind of insane. We got plant-based protein, which is not ideal, but I'm lactose, so I can't do the whey protein. We got a banana, and we got 1 cup of Lactaid brand lactose-free milk. It's actually pretty good. Doesn't taste bad.
Get those votes thrown out. It's the most ironic thing of all time, as they are claiming Democrats rig election.
But apparently, like, whey protein is you drink protein so your muscles get bigger, right? You grow new muscles. Like, it helps your muscles heal and grow. And apparently, plant-based protein produces worse results than whey protein. Is there another kind of protein besides plant-based protein that doesn't have whey? Are there other options? Or is whey just like, whey's the move? Interesting. Okay.
And part of their operation is to try to rig elections for Republicans. Okay, keep going.
And this is your point.
They challenged all together by election day. They challenged, as my producer Martin Sheen says, they challenged 2 million voters. This has not been reported on. The New York Times, Washington Post did some little stories about, oh yeah, there's these challenges there. If you're watching this on
Don't creatine, dude. Everybody, all the in health and fitness YouTubers, they're all about creatine. I feel like all of them are like, yeah, creatine's awesome. I've been watching a bunch of like Dr. Mike, that guy, what's his name?
On your, not just listening, but there is a woman in a red dress, Republican Party official, who personally challenged 32,000 people. I'm showing her a photo of a black woman, a neighbor of hers, who she challenged 32,379 voters. That's just the beginning.
And so it's perfectly legal. Yeah. And that the way we're set up, that's perfectly legal. That one person.
It may be legal. I mean, here's, according to the NAACP, Gerald Griggs, the president of the NAACP, is in my film. And by the way, you can download my film, or you can stream my film, Vigilantes, Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitmen, at gregpalast.com or saveyourvote.org. So go to gregpalast.com. You can stream it for free. Thank you, Leonardo DiCaprio, who made this available for free.
I mean, it's a great movie that showcases your reporting, and there's going to be a link to it under this video and under the show as well. Yeah.
So that's just one way. 2 million voters were challenged.
I'm at a place right now where I feel so jaded after the election that even assuming everything this guy is saying is true, like right now in this period of time, I just can't be bothered to give a which is not great. Like that's not, I don't want to maintain that forever. And I'm not saying that this kind of investigative reporting isn't important or that there aren't issues that we need to take a look at. I'm just saying right now in this moment, 1 week after the election and probably for the next like few weeks, it's just hard for me to give a, you know what I mean? That's just where I'm at with things.
Million, almost all the voters have
come. Explain to us, Greg Palast, what happened. So they're challenged. How do they end up in a trash heap?
Well, this is what happened. Okay, first of all, you have to understand, you think, well, what the hell is this? These people aren't government officials. Who are they to challenge voters? Well, we have leftover Jim Crow laws. The last time this mass challenge of voters occurred was 1946. 1946, that's more than a half century ago, when the Ku Klux Klan mounted a challenge of almost all the black voters of Georgia, and they elected a Klansman as governor. Now, here's the interesting thing. At that time, in 46.
Yeah, I'll go back to caring. I will. I promise you I'll go back. It's just right now, I'm just like, he won. He won. He's coming. Can't stop what's coming.
The Justice Department and the FBI moved to indict the governor of Georgia who had won his election. He was a Klansman who won through this trickery of challenging voters. And they were about to arrest him, but he drank himself to death just before the FBI arrived to handcuff him. Now, here's the weird thing. That was 1946. It was considered illegal by the Justice Department in 1946. And yet the 1946 Klan plan became the Trump plan of 2024. And nothing has happened to stop this. That's just one of the ways that vote suppression has worked here. And I'm telling you, that was 2 million votes. Now, what happens when you are challenged? Either you walk away and say, well, I don't have the right to vote. You show up to vote. And by the way, if you've mailed in your ballot, it won't get counted. About 60, I want to emphasize this. This is not small. About 60% of the American public votes early or by mail. Over half the American population votes that way. You mail in your vote, and you've been challenged by a vigilante, you won't know it, and your vote goes in the garbage. If you show up to vote, they may hand you something that they call a provisional ballot. Now, what is a provisional ballot? I call it a placebo ballot. The lady behind the desk says, oh, just fill out this form and your ballot will count, and they'll go through it, find your registration, your ballot will count. No, it won't. If you're not on the registration rolls, you're not on the registration rolls, and you can fill out 92 provisional ballots. They won't count. They won't count.
I did not know that. That's extraordinary. I've had that happen. I filled it out where they didn't because of some glitch in the system. Because
if you did, your vote didn't count. Your vote went in the garbage, my friend. So here's what happens with a provisional ballot. According to the United States Elections Assistance Commission, which is our federal agency which tracks these things, 4 years ago, there were 10 million people shunted to provisional ballots. 10 million, like you. 2.7 million. 1 out of 4 of those ballots, more than 1 out of 4 of those ballots, 2.7 million ballots, almost about a third, were never counted, thrown in the garbage, thrown in the dumpster. 2.7 million voters. Now, here's the interesting thing, Mark. If these were illegal voters, why don't you arrest them? You know, if I rob a bank, they don't close my bank account. They put me in prison. So if someone now voting illegally, if you've registered to vote illegally, if you know, like
We Killed It said, I just checked my provisional ballot and it was counted today. LOL. Who is this loser talking? I literally wasn't in the flip book on election day and they gave me the provisional and it's been counted. Same with my wife since we moved counties. I filled out a provisional ballot in 2016 that was eventually counted as well. So I'm not sure why he's confidently saying that provisional ballots never end up in the results.
Claim that there are aliens voting and people swimming the Rio Grande to vote for Kamala Harris, whatever. That if that's true, then arrest them. I'm not in favor of vote fraud. But how many other 2.7 million people were arrested for illegally attempting to register a vote? Out of 2.7 million, how many do you think were arrested for that crime of illegal voting?
I know the answer because I know your stuff. Yeah, it was 1.
0.
Right? Oh, 0. Well, wasn't they find 1? Somebody from Austria or something? Greg.
Oh, yes. There was about back 8. It was 12 years ago. In 12 years ago, there was in Florida. There was one Austrian who registered as a Republican and voted in 2008.
Yeah, illegally, right?
Voted illegally for McCain. So there was one single voter, a Republican. That was it.
Now that Elon is part of Trump's world, how long before Elon becomes president? Well, he's never going to become president, but the amount of influence he has right now is astronomical. Like it's like George Soros on crack. Like imagine if George Soros had 40 times as much money. And he bought an entire social media platform and then pressured the engineers to mess with the algorithm to create a more favorable environment for conservatives and Republicans. It's just so much worse than anything they've accused the Democrats of doing with George Soros. Like what Elon is doing right now with the Republicans is orders of magnitude worse and more influential.
From Australia, in 4 years ago, it was 2.7 million voters rejected for voting illegally. All you have to, I'm just asking you to find 2 of those people who voted illegally. Instead, now, if it were random, by the way, Mark, if it were random, sure. Who would care? But the truth is, if you're Black, Hispanic, Asian American, your chance that you will be shunted to provisional ballot is 300% higher than if you're white. And if your ballot is ultimately rejected for some reason, if you're Black, the chance your ballot will not count. We don't talk about this in America. Ballot's not counting. The chance of your ballot being disqualified is 700% higher if you're Black than if you're white. That's the official government figures. So we're not talking about a few votes. We're talking about millions. Now, did that flip this election? I got to tell you, for those watching on TV, I've got on your video, I've got this fedora on, which indicates that I'm an investigative reporter, and I cannot report unless I've investigated. I'm trying now to get the numbers of ballots that were rejected, of the people shunted to provisional ballots in each state. It's just very, very difficult. I can tell you right now, when I'm at BBC We tell you how many ballots were not counted. In America, we keep that secret because in Britain,
it's being reported that Trump told members of the House conference, I believe, that Elon just won't go home. I don't know. I find that I'm a little skeptical of that. I feel like, I don't know. My gut tells me that I doubt that reporting.
it's a couple hundred in the entire nation, a few hundred in the entire nation where ballots were unreadable and spoiled. In America, it's millions and millions. So I just told you 2.7 million provisional ballots were thrown in the dumpster. We got about 1.5 million ballots, what they call spoiled. Now, Mark, you don't spoil a vote by leaving it out of the fridge. You spoil a vote because they say it's unreadable. Again, if you're black, it's 700% more likely your vote will be in that spoilage dumpster. And it's not a small amount. It's about 1.5 million votes. We also have the massive purge of voter rolls. There are about 20 million people who were last couple of years, purged from voter rolls. Now, some of those are dead. Some have moved. Some have changed. But I got to tell you this. In Georgia alone, when they removed 500,000 voters from the voter rolls, I asked Amazon. And remember, Amazon knows where you live, Mark. You don't get someone else's tidy-whities. Right. Mark Thompson is a common name. But you don't get someone else's stuff. They don't get yours. And so Amazon knows where you live. They use 1,800 data points to make sure that you live where you live. So I asked Amazon, the Palace Fund, they're experts, if they would go through the list of 500,000 voters removed just in Georgia. And they gave me back a list with the names and addresses. This is not guessing. They went through every single name. It's 340,134 people. That's a third of a million people removed from the rolls wrongly, that they still live exactly at their voting address. Overwhelmingly, these are voters of color. Now, I'm just looking at one state, purge in Wisconsin, 130,000 were facing a purge. And they said, well, about 35,000 of these people. And again, they weren't guessing. They're giving me the names and addresses of each and every one of the people wrongly removed. And in Wisconsin, swing state, they said a third of the voting address. And guess what? I worked at the Washington Post. And they did a map for me. And they showed that the people removed wrongly from the voter rolls, almost every one of them were in one of two places, either Milwaukee, the black voting precincts of Milwaukee, was an exact match. We had a map.
Has anyone looked at how many states are majority GOP? We may see some stupid GOP amendment in our lifetime. Okay, hold on. So first of all, it's been a minute since civics class. But what are the thresholds you need to pass a constitutional amendment? It's proposed by a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress, or if 2/3 of the states request one, by a convention called for that purpose. The amendment must then be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures or 3/4 of conventions called in each state for ratification. So the threshold to actually pass a constitutional amendment is absurdly high. And right now, I don't think the Republicans are even anywhere close to that level of consensus. It seems unlikely that we're going to get any constitutional amendment in the next 20 to 30 years. We would have to depolarize substantially as a country before something like that can happen. When was the last time we passed a constitutional amendment? 1992. The 27th Amendment required any change to the rate of compensation for members of the U.S. Congress to take effect only after the subsequent election in the House of Representatives. And then before that, the 26th Amendment, 1971. So yeah, it's just really, really, really difficult to pass a federal constitutional amendment.
Exact match. Black voters in Milwaukee were removed from the voter rolls, and students in Madison, Wisconsin. Did that make the difference in Wisconsin? Likely, but I don't know. Right now, I'm going to tell you again, I'm a reporter. I can't, well, the states are hiding these facts. I actually had to go to federal court to get this data.
Wow. So he's talking about spoiled ballots, which is, oh, it's not readable. We can't count this. We need to throw it out. He's talking about voter roll purges. Oftentimes, depending on the state, if there's like, a little mistake, you put the date in the wrong place, or you put your middle initial when you shouldn't have, or you don't put your middle initial when you should have. There's all these reasons to spoil the ballots, toss the ballots. There's all these voter roll purges. There's, according to him, provisional ballots, a lot.
I believe that's how prohibition was repealed. The prohibition was repealed with a constitutional amendment. Yeah.
Of them not counted at all. So this is more the highfalutin argument of rigged election. It's more of a voter suppression argument than it is Elon Musk, Starlink, changing the votes type argument. So these are a whole bunch of different arguments that are being presented. Look, from my perspective, the Starlink thing, I think highly, highly unlikely. A lot of the voting infrastructure is not even connected to the internet, right? So that
don't just say it's highly unlikely. Say it's bullshit. It's bullshit.
Wouldn't make much sense. This is sort of like the Mike Lindell argument that he made, like, it was all the, this county was stolen. And then, you talk to the county election official and they're like, we're not even connected to the internet. And he's claiming it was stolen on the internet. That doesn't make sense. So the Starlink thing is highly unlikely. But this is more the highfalutin argument as to with little, cut.
Here's a local story about the Starlink being used. It said it on the news. The boxes were connected to Starlink and had a tabulation issue that was resolved.
Got processed and through those lines quickly, and that's due to all of their hard work and dedication that they do out at the poll sites.
Registrar Michelle Baldwin says access to connectivity was improved this year thanks to Starlink satellite internet. She adds early technical difficulties with the tabulator machine were quickly fixed and did not impact vote.
It would just be so flagrant. It would be so flagrant for Elon to do that. Like, we're talking about such a massive risk for something that would be so easily discovered. If Elon actually did do some kind of a Starlink election interference thing, it's not easy to do something like that while mitigating most of the risk of getting caught. It's just so far-fetched on its face.
Vote count. 5 of the 10 volunteers assigned to the Exeter poll location did not show up, but Baldwin says all of the sites still ran smoothly and were able to be wrapped up with voters.
Yeah, this is blue and on. This is just full on blue and on.
Corners here and there, little tweaks around the edges, a little bit of voter roll purge, a little bit of throw out the provisional ballots, a little bit of spoiling more ballots than you should, and boom, how many does that add up to? Now, to be fair to him, he's saying, I don't know. Right? And he's saying, I can't tell you unless I actually have the hard data and the exact numbers, whether or not this stuff would have made the difference. But here's my controversial take on this. I could not care less that liberals are doing this because Republicans just spent 4 years denying the results of the last election wrongly in their case, because there were 60 plus court cases.
See, now this, I get it. I get what he's saying here. It makes sense to me. I have had so many conversations with people like Rob Noor, who went down about 15 different rabbit holes to justify, if not fully committing to the there was voter fraud position, but walking right up to the line. And they would question your sanity if you pointed out to them that there was no compelling evidence that there was widespread voter fraud. If you said that, they would come back and hit you with stuff like, well, come on, just think about it. Like, come on, it's obvious. It's obvious there's problems with mail-in. And they would just find a way. Or they would shift it to something like, if it wasn't voter fraud, it was like, well, it wasn't voter fraud, but they suppressed the Hunter Biden story. So even though I don't co-sign any of this blue and on with regard to like looking for these massive frauds, I think it's silly and stupid. I kind of understand taking the position of let's just say there was voter fraud, right? Every time we get into an argument with MAGA people, just be like, well, it's obvious that Trump rigged it against Kamala. It's like, it's obvious. Come on. There were that many voter registrations and she got less votes than Biden. Come on. I mean, she got endorsed by Taylor Swift. And you expect me to believe that 8 million less people voted for her in 2024? Like, give me a break. It's Taylor Swift. Are you kidding me? That's like a nuclear bomb. Like, I kind of understand that. And I haven't quite decided which, like, if I'm going to actually do that. Like, I'm thinking about it. It's a concept of a plan right now.
Cases that were thrown out oftentimes by MAGA judges. You had the Arizona audit, which went back through the votes, and they found out not only did Biden win, he won by more than what he thought he won by on election day. They broke it down 79,000 ways, and they were just wrong. They were just wrong about that election. But they just spent 4 years denying the last election, and there was literally zero political price to pay for it. It didn't hurt them
well, they paid a price in 2022. They did not pay a price in 2024.
In any way, shape, or form. If anything, you could argue maybe help them. It's
just a fact that election deniers got destroyed in 2022.
Trump literally ran on it this time, kept saying he won, convinced a large number of people in the public that he won, and he ended up winning again, right? And so if there's zero political price to pay, and it's like people want liberals and Democrats and leftists to fight with their hands tied behind their back. Like, you need to abide by all the rules and the regulations and the decorum and the civility and do everything right and dot every I and cross every T. And then the Republicans get to be foaming at the mouth psychopaths and get away with everything and then eventually still end up back in power. So from my perspective,
I mean, it's horrible for like the health of our republic and the health of democracy. It's just horrible to go around pretending like there was voter fraud. But on a petty level, I get it. I get it.
Let them cook. Let them cook. I want to see I want to see the same
Let the libs cook, he said.
amount of passion and anger and vitriol and unhinged arrogance coming from liberals and leftists and Democrats as we see from Republicans on a regular basis. Because what we're used to for so long is when they go low, we go high, and we're the ones who are so, we do everything just right, and we're the teacher's pets, and we make sure that everything is on the up and up, and everything is perfect, and then you get your eyes spit in on a regular basis. And so I don't see any downside to these conversations. I don't see any downside to the TikTok liberals even going with the most insane, unhinged kind of conspiracy theories. I don't see a downside.
Why not?
It's going to be hard to get me to care. And by the way, the second the Republicans and, the right wingers online start going after, liberal election deniers, election deniers, I don't give a fuck what these people have to say. Yeah. I don't give a fuck about their criticisms of liberals and leftists and Democrats. They've been wrong about everything consistently. Year after year, they've been absolutely unhinged and arrogant. They've paid no political price for it. So now, if you want to get a little taste of your own medicine and fight a side that doesn't have their hands tied behind their back, go right ahead. Now, I don't think this changes the calculation as to what the Democratic Party has to do moving forward. I think, regardless of what the reality is here, Democrats still need to have an ironclad narrative. Trump has his narrative. Immigrants, they're the problem. Hollywood cultural elites, they're the problem. You need to counter that with the correct narrative, which is the problem is the billionaires and the corporations and the super PACs and the lobbyists and the special interests and the big money donors. They're the ones who've rigged our government, and that government represents them. It doesn't represent you, regular people. Democrats need their narrative, and they need to embrace a bold agenda that helps people. You need to embrace social democracy and universal health care and social security for all and ending the corruption and ending the wars. So it doesn't change.
Well, right now we need to stop the bleeding is what we need to do. We can get to all kinds of big, bold things, but before you do that, you have to build enough of a mandate that they would that the American people would even allow you to pursue these agendas.
Change that part of the analysis, right? And even
I get a little frustrated with lefty analysis of the election where it's especially, I feel like when you go to Nina Turner's, I feel like Kyle has had a balance of takes that, I don't disagree with all of his takes. But when you go to Nina Turner's Twitter feed, it's just Kamala would have won if she ran on Medicare for all. It's Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Well, she ran on Medicare for all twice in Ohio's 11th district. And, she lost both of her primaries. So it can't be that simple, right?
In a scenario where you argue that these people are correct, well, then
first we need to convince median voters that the Democratic Party are not goddamn communists. First of all, maybe that can help with some of the Latino vote, right? The problem, an actual problem. There's a lot of first and second generation Latino voters whose families or they themselves literally fled authoritarian communist regimes, and the Republicans have done a tremendous job convincing these people that the Democratic Party wants to do communism in the United States. So we need to convince these people we're not goddamn communists, first of all. I mean, there's so many things we need to do to stop the bleeding right now. I'm not saying we shouldn't try for big, bold policy. I'm saying there needs to be some triage. We need to prioritize a few things before we start talking about a $15 an hour minimum wage, $20 an hour minimum wage. We have to stop the bleeding before we can get to any of that. And I just reject the notion that it's as simple as just running, just go full speed to the left on big, bold programs, and the rest will just take care of itself. I just don't think any of that is true, because when you did a blind test, there was some pollster that did a blind test of both candidates' policies, and in blind tests, Kamala's policies were overwhelmingly more popular than Trump's when you didn't tell them which candidate who actually presented these policies. So policy is not the issue right now. Policy is not the reason why Kamala Harris lost, and policy is not the reason why she would have won. I don't think her running on paid family leave would have changed the outcome of this election, unfortunately.
It's our turn to make it too big to rig, right? It's our turn to...
Bernie is the most popular politician in America. I'm not even sure if that's true. His popularity is also going to be nuanced. So according to Statista, in a survey of US adults conducted in July of 2024, it was a YouGov poll. 22% of the country had a very favorable view of Bernie Sanders. 22% similarly had a somewhat favorable view of him, for a total of 44% that's either somewhat or very favorable. Wait, hold on a second. Am I insane? Both of these are somewhat favorable. This poll doesn't make any sense. Hold on. In 2022, Sanders has highest favorability poll among possible 2024 contenders poll. I wouldn't doubt that he is more popular than the average politician. I just don't know if he's the most popular politician in America right now. Like, I don't know if his favorables are higher than like Tim Walz. Oh, it said somewhat unfavorable. I'm an idiot. Hold on. How did I miss that? No, I don't want to. Why is it making me log in now? Don't do that. Okay. Well, anyways, I think his popularity is also a bit like, I feel like there's a wide tent of Bernie supporters. So you have some Bernie supporters that are full on social democrats or democratic socialists or socialists who just full throatedly endorse him and his policies and want the United States to become like a leftist utopia. But then you also have a sizable portion of his supporters that like him because they think he vaguely represents a threat to the system and the establishment. And so there's a bit of that like kind of vaguely anti-establishment appeal that people like RFK enjoy, that same sort of appeal. And so I think it's a mixed bag when we're talking about support for Bernie Sanders.
Get so many people passionate and go into the polls that no matter what kind of trickery they do, nothing can stop us, right? But again, go ahead, let him cook. Let him cook. I want to see foaming at the mouth, insane, unhinged, arrogant, angry liberals and leftists and Democrats.
Let me be clear. I am not saying we should storm the Capitol building during the certification of the 2024 election, but I am just saying maybe these Republicans are onto something here. But once again, I am not saying we should do our own January 6th, but maybe.
Jesus Christ.
Look, the undeniable lesson of what happened with Trump is being.
Look, I don't know if I believe that in order to beat Trump, we must become him. In order to beat the MAGA movement, we must become MAGA and just go full on, just like, let's just lean into the bullshit, right? Let's just lie our asses off, you know? It's possible that needs to happen. That is the right move. That we need to just like fully stoop to that level and just blatantly knowingly lie our asses off. I don't know if I believe that that's what we need to do. But I definitely don't want to believe that. I don't want to believe that we can't win people over by making compelling arguments and telling the truth. And maybe that's naive. I really don't know. Maybe Kyle's right, but I don't want to believe that he's right.